first started in college, I was a speech therapy major at Augustana College in Illinois, and I really did not like it. So I was just looking for something, a better place to be, a bigger city to live in, and came to Boston. And I went to Boston University in psychology. I was really lucky to get kind of a part-time job in a pharmacology lab at Boston University, and it was just working with animals was great. I thought, I like this. I want to go to vet school. But, you know, I was a psychology major and I had some making up to do because I hadn't taken the prerequisites for vet school like they do with medical school. They pretty much start them taking them all. So my last 2 years of college, I had a lot to take, chemistry, organic, and calculus and all that. But I got through it, and Tufts was starting right at that time. So I was lucky enough to get into Tufts and went from there. So.
Did you imagine you would end up working in research? Or, I mean, did you have a dream of an animal clinic someplace, or what was your goal when you started?
You know, I was lucky to have that lab experience early on. I think that did help me, you know, keep my mind open through vet school. And also when Tufts started, we had a dean, Frank Lowe. He was very much a visionary, and he had an idea that the veterinary education was so valuable to like all different parts of society that we really shouldn't be educating veterinarians just to be clinicians, that there were lots of places in the world that veterinarians could be useful. And although I did go into practice right after vet school, and I'm glad that I did, I really think that helped me to keep my mind open about other possibilities. We learned about all kinds of different potential careers.
Is that different than other programs?
Well, I mean, that was 30 years ago. I mean, at the time, I think it was really new. And it wasn't just an add-on. You know, it was really like part of what we learned was clinics, but it was all, you know, kind of equal parts. It wasn't like in the past at all the schools, clinics, and oh, by the way. So it wasn't like that, which was good. I always felt like the values in our house were to help people. My dad was a criminal defense attorney, and you know, it seemed like an area where you could really concretely help people. And I always have felt, especially since I've been in management for quite a while now, I use on the day-to-day level, I use that psychology degree a lot. So.
Were there any particular historical events or local happenings in the beginning of your career that you think have influenced any emphasis you have or any particular goals that you have?
Well, early in my career, I right after vet school, my husband and I moved back to Chicago, and I was an associate in a small animal practice just outside the city. And it was a great experience. And, you know, I learned a whole lot about how animals and people work together, you know, what it means for different people to have a pet and what their animals mean in their life. That was very useful to me. And I did that for about 3 years, and then I switched to a very large, very busy Humane Society practice in the city. And that helped me because I really could see like where animals fit in society, you know, more than just kind of at the individual and family level, but now looking at the bigger level, working with animal control officers. And we had a mobile clinic that, you know, went to disadvantaged neighborhoods that didn't have a practice in the neighborhood. And, we had, a lot of people would bring the only companion they had, this cat they lived with, that was, the only companion they had, and they would bring to our clinic. And it really made me think about animals kind of on a bigger scale, which I think it has been helpful. In regulatory medicine, that is what you're doing, is kind of taking what you know kind of on the ground level, at the pet level and at the individual animal use level, and you're kind of looking at it more from the society point of view. So I think switching to that animal, society, that Humane Society practice, that was kind of pivotal because it took me out of that individual level view.
And then you went to even a larger scale.
Yeah.
So what was the path from the Humane Society to Eastern Regional Director for the Animal Care Program of APHIS? Is that how we say it?
Right, APHIS.
What was that path?
I had been at the Anti-Cruelty Society for, 3 or maybe 4 years. I had a baby, and it was very hard physical work. It was a lot. And, I was thinking, well, what would be a good next step? There was a path to promotion within the Anti-Cruelty Society, or could have gone back to practice somewhere else. But I was really, I think, looking for something else. And I remembered back in school, and when Dean Lowe had different people come and teach us from all, different organizations. But we did have an APHIS veterinarian who came and taught us some classes. And, I called him and said, this is where I am in my career. This is what I'm interested in. I was working at Anti-Cruelty. I have an animal welfare interest. I now have experience. What do you think? And he said, that's really, it's Dr. Moulton, he said, that's really interesting that you called, because APHIS right now is going through a change. Since the beginning of the Animal Welfare Act to then, which was 1988, animal welfare was a collateral duty for the veterinarians that did animal health work in the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. And that was good because they had veterinarians everywhere. And so, geographically, you could really cover a lot of space, and they could just integrate it into their work. But animal welfare was getting more and more specialized, kind of more attention from the media and the public. And, that's, around the time a lot of things are happening in the media and that kind of thing. And so I guess he just said, this isn't for sure, but if you come with us, there's a chance that you could get in on the ground floor of this new organization, which is not going to be a collateral duty. It's going to be a full-time job. The bad part of it was you're going to have to take your chances on where you get assigned in the beginning, which we ended up getting assigned to Minot, North Dakota.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Gracious.
I was like, my husband said, you really better want to do this. It was like, whoa. But we only were there for 8 months, and it snowed when we got there, and it snowed when we left. But after that, I did get appointed to the position that was animal welfare inspector, the ground floor inspector for all of Wisconsin, and I had a chunk of Minnesota and a little bit down into the Chicago area too. And that was a really great first posting with APHIS. So.
Is this the story that I think I read somewhere, where you used to get in a car and drive around and inspect facilities and be gone for a couple days on the road?
Yeah, every week. Yeah. Load up the car, pick an area. Maybe, I would go down to the southwest, or I would, go up north, Lake Superior and that, and just do inspections and then come home.
Was this the beginning when inspections were required? Was this a new thing for the people that you were visiting? Or?
Well, they had been inspected by the veterinary services VMOs, by the veterinary health VMOs as part of their job. But this was the beginning of having, one person go all over the state. Before, a section VMO would just go in the area near them.
And this was a better design to have one person doing all of it, or?
Better for the animals. I'm convinced of that.
Really?
Better for the animals.
Why?
Yes, because it was the veterinarians in veterinary services were interested in, experienced with, and very well trained in animal health. That's their job. And, oh, by the way, pick up a few animal welfare inspections for us. But it was practically impossible for the agency to get them all trained and have them do it the same, and really keep an eye on what they were doing. So this way, no matter how you slice it, you have different inspectors, and it's hard to keep them together. But in that scenario, it was very difficult to make sure everyone had the same level of commitment and did it the same way. So I think it definitely was better for APHIS, a better product for APHIS, better for the animals, better for the industry, because, they could get answers
Right.
that were more consistent. So.
What did you expect your experience would be when you started that job? Was it as you expected? Were you surprised by what you found, or?
I was surprised by a couple things. I don't think I had any idea how many people out there just get some animals and start a business. And you don't need a lot of licensing, or you don't need permission from people. You can just get some animals in and go to work, and particularly, back then. And wild or exotic animals, people would just start up a dog kennel. Partly it's a business. And, a lot of people aren't natural business managers, and we're really struggling with that. So that was a surprise to me.
I know you're involved with certificating or accrediting puppy dog breeders in these same areas, right? Geographical areas.
Right.
What have you seen that's different from then to now?
There's a lot more. There's a lot more openness about the whole business of breeding puppies for the pet trade than there used to be. I don't know if people weren't interested, or there really wasn't a lot of information available about, where did these puppies that were in the pet stores, where did they come from? Nobody really asked, and so there just wasn't a lot of information out there. Now, there's a lot more light on the whole industry.
So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thing.
And what kind of certification does a dog breeder need? What are the requirements?
Mm-hmm. Under the Animal Welfare Act, if you want to sell commercially, okay, so if you want to sell puppies to someone who's going to resell them, a broker or a pet store, something like that, then you need a federal USDA license in order to do that. It's still, there's no federal regulation of, every kennel. It's not like that. A lot of people breed dogs and just sell them retail. They sell them to the person who's going to keep that dog, that puppy as a pet. That doesn't require federal regulation. But states are different, and counties and right down to the cities are all, with more awareness, there's more regulation on every level of that. I think it is a measure of quality control. If someone is in the commercial puppy breeding business and they are licensed with us, then anyone in the public can just go online and they can see our inspection reports are right up there. You can go see what we found the last time we went through. And so in that way, it is quality control. There's also a little bit of a stigma. People think that if you are a big breeder and you're licensed with us, that maybe your operation is a puppy mill and it's not as homey maybe, or not as individualized as, a breeder that might only have a couple of dogs and just sell a few puppies. So I did that for a couple years, and then I became the animal care specialist. So that was more like a regional technical specialist for a lot of inspectors in the Southeast region. I had Florida and Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. And so that was kind of like a technical resource for the home inspectors. And I went on lots of inspections with the local inspector to help for consistency and if we had, enforcement problems, that kind of thing. And then after that, I kind of was a supervisor and now the director for the region.
So I mentioned earlier that when I look up your name on the internet, I see many references that people should write to you if they want to report some kind of cruelty to animal, or it seemed to me animal abuse in the realm of some official capacity, that a company or an institution or an organization was doing something incorrect with an animal. So how many of these emails and letters do you deal with every week?
Well, sometimes, the last 3 or 4 years, we've probably had right around 400 different types of complaints or concerns sent in per year. Okay, so that's different incidents that our people have concerns about. We can have kind of campaigns where, we'll get hundreds of letters on a single incident or thousands of emails about one thing that people are concerned about. But as far as like different things that we've looked into, it runs around 400 a year.
So why are people writing to you very specifically? What do they expect when they complain to you about something? That's an interesting question. What do they expect? I can tell you what the agency can do, okay? When we learn about a concern, okay, we're going to look into the information that we have gotten and the information that we already have about that entity, whether it's a researcher or a zoo, an exhibitor, circus, or a breeder. We're going to look into what we already know, the information that we got in, and then we're going to do our job, which is to review their compliance with the regulations and standards under the Act. I think when we get lots of complaints about, certain, activities, I think one thing people expect is that we will take notice that this is important to me. A good example might be circus elephants. We get lots of people concerned about circus elephants. And that is good to know. It may not be that we can take every one of those and do something because they're already either in compliance
with the standards and regulations, or maybe we're already working with them to get them in compliance. It may not change what we do to that particular facility, but it does let the agency know, people are concerned about this. This is important. This is where we want you to put resources. This is something that, we care about these animals, and we expect you, our government, to be watching them for us.
So to be very clear, the department that people are writing to is the animal care department. And what?
Right.
You have a lot. There's
many initials.
What part of that line are people interested when they want to complain?
Right. Well, I use the department to mean the whole Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Okay. And that's kind of, I think that's important because that goes right to the president, right? I mean, Secretary Vilsack is in the president's cabinet, and that shows you that, this is part of a big organization that is responsive to what people care about.
Mm-hmm.
But underneath in all the bureaucracy and all the levels of, agencies and divisions, animal care is the animal welfare piece. Out of all of the Department of Agriculture, animal care is the one that has responsibility for the animal welfare part. The whole thing about, my neighbor kicked his dog, or I drove past a horse that looked hungry, we get that all the time. I'm not counting those. And we try really hard to get those referred back to, the local official. If anybody has a concern that's really local like that, then we try and get somebody to answer their questions. But those 400 that I'm talking about, and you can see a lot of those letters online, those are the kind of businesses that fall under the Animal Welfare Act. So I don't think that the public has any idea how hard institutions work to make sure that this is done right from the concept, from the beginning of thinking about possibly using animal research, way before you even order an animal. There's so much work that goes into, making sure this is done right, so much collaboration, so many checks and balances in the system. And I think, you're right. What hits news when, after all this and all these protections are in place, and yet something goes wrong, and that hits the news, and then the expectation is that, animal care or the institution themselves will quickly take action. But there isn't really, I don't think, an appreciation of all the front work.
And how could we address that?
Yeah, that is a good question. One of the challenges that we have too is the regulations are so dry and they're complicated, and you try and explain, well, look, there's a protocol and it's reviewed and there's a veterinarian every step of the way, and but that's so unemotional compared to all the emotion of even the picture of that little cage with an animal in there, and it doesn't really get the interest. We just recently, like in the last 3 years or so, have gotten the Center for Animal Welfare in Kansas City, which it's a bad time to try and staff up a whole new entity, but we're trying, because I think we realize that in research and every other thing that we regulate, we need more outreach and education. And the regional job that I'm doing is more to the inspections and, the kind of boots on the ground and making sure that, everybody who's regulated is where they need to be. but we need that other level, that outreach, and we couldn't do both. So we're trying to get this center up and running. Another initiative that I know our Deputy Administrator, Dr. Gibson's been working on is trying to get it in the vet schools. There really is no requirement for veterinarians even to understand all this. And that would be a good start, to make sure that every graduate veterinarian has the big picture, because in a lot of, in their communities, they're the resource for animal information.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Who needs to require that of veterinary schools?
Well, the AVMA is the one that accredits the vet schools, and the vet tech schools and all that are accredited through the AVMA. And then there's an association of medical colleges, and they also would be, a great place to put in, because, people with a medical education are frequently involved in research to have, even if you're not doing it every day in your career, to have that basic knowledge. So, I guess it's through the professional organizations to push that. And they have been working on it, but we'll get there. One of the things that I think helps the most is to support organizations that do training and that get people together from other institutions. And we've always had great efforts in that direction in the research part of what we regulate. They've really been on the forefront and understanding, look, we need to talk to each other. We need to help each other do this right and get everybody educated and understanding. And that's just a whole different environment to work in than entities who are using animals and are very isolated. And, we want to have a role in outreach and education and that kind of thing. But really, the department cannot do all that's needed in that arena. And our focus has to be assuring that people are meeting the standards and taking care of their animals, and if not, we're doing something about it. It really helps if there's other organizations that are in there helping with the outreach and education. So I think in our breeder communities that they're just starting to see the value of that and making a little progress. So one of the issues that we have is that it is an emotional area to work in. And the physical look in photographs and that kind of thing, the way it looks, it just is emotional to people. And I actually don't believe that we, and I don't know, I'll speak for myself, but I don't think that we know enough about what it means for the animals to be in the environment they're in, which looks bad to people. I think we just have to face it. Though people, when they see it like that, it looks bad. It's, it's like the old, if you think about, kind of the old style exhibitions and how the public has changed, and it's not acceptable. And it used to be no problem. You'd walk by, you'd see the bars, animal behind the bars, you're in front, and that was normal. And it isn't anymore. The public changed, the environment changed, and I think the way the public looked at the whole ethics of keeping those animals like that changed. But it's not so easy in research. It's not so easy to know what that environment means to the animal, and it's not so easy to convince the public or help educate the public on what that environment means. And I guess I wish we all, knew more about that we knew that, you know what, these animals, they're good in this enclosure, and if we had a way to communicate that and somehow make it so that it wasn't like that recoil response, that we could change the perception. We now have animals in zoos. Well, a lot of them, frankly, they're not in very much bigger enclosures. It's not, from maybe the animal's point of view, it's not a lot different than it was. But our reaction has totally changed. Our understanding of their welfare in what they're in has changed. And I'm not saying it would be simple or something, but I wish we could kind of cross that divide, because I think until people, you can say they're okay. The agency can say we have regulations. When they are in this environment being cared for like this, that meets their welfare needs. And we can all say that. And we can know from the way they act, or maybe their cortisol level or whatever, we can know that they're okay. But I don't see a change in public opinion on that. And I get why. Because when I get those pictures in the mail, when you see them on the web, that's not something that people are going to look at and say, well, their cortisol levels are okay, it must be all right. It's not going to work. We live in just a very open society. I'm glad that we do. I don't want to be, to have information, to know things, to be keeping things away that, I wouldn't feel like comfortable with everyone knowing this is what we do, this is what we found, this is our conclusion from what we saw. And that's all good. I mean, it is difficult because, there's other organizations that have a lot more time to spend with the media, than we do, and, maybe less concerns about, say, proprietary business information or, making sure that everyone has due process and all that kind of thing. We don't want to lose that either. There is an expectation out there of instant information. And, kind of touched on it before, but we want to be careful and deliberative in what we do and how we do it. And yet there is an expectation that we have instantly information available, both internally, within the department and to the public. And, people think that there should be information right away, which, makes it seem a little more, of an emergency, and, you have to kind of watch for things getting out. Not things you don't want out, but just, to make sure that everything has been considered before. I don't know. I also think that when we get, let's say, video, or, when we get photographs or something from people, it's a lot easier for just any person to just send us information right off their cell phones. And that's very valuable to us. I think that it has really kind of increased our ability to take action quickly if there is a problem. which is great because, we have probably 105 inspectors right now for the whole country. It's not very many. We're very lucky to have Primer, I think. We really are, because, if we don't get this dialogue thing going, if we don't learn how to talk to each other, this is going to be done the hard way. To me, the agency needs to do this as much as possible, to try and step up and talk to everyone and have everybody, at the table in how we work through regulations and how we, get the information to the public and that. But, there's a lot of rules, and there should be rules, because we have to worry in government about undue influence from people, and so there needs to be rules, and while we want to bring everybody to the table, it's a lot easier for a group like Primer to do, and so we're very lucky. There's a lot of people that recognize that we need to be talking and work these things out. And the middle needs to be talking, because right now, there's a lot of talking on the margins and not a lot of talking to each other in the middle. It's hard. I think it's hard to talk in the middle. It's hard to have that trust. There's a lot on the line.
Let's define the participants on this.
Okay.
Who are on each end?
To me, I think of it as there's industry groups, and not just in research, but there's also people who advocate for their industry, that have kind of as their job, as their goal, to protect their industry, to make sure that their industry can operate the way they think that it needs to happen. And then on the other side, there's interest groups, and their job is to make sure that that information is getting out, that there's public interest in these issues, that that they are heard, that they have resources so that they can work on this mission of animal welfare. And on the extremes of it can be a defensive, kind of attacking sort of place. And it's really hard when there's so much at stake, when I don't know, when it's everybody's really emotional and care so much about it. It's hard to get to the middle, to where I trust you to say what I really think and not make hay out of it, and I trust you that you really aren't trying to attack me, that we're just both working toward better animal welfare. I think it's just really hard to build that kind of trust and have the discussion. There are really smart people who have really good intentions on both sides, and it could happen. I think it could get there, and it will. I mean, Primer's the closest to me that I see that happen. If only there would be a way to be able to show it, to publicly show it, that every animal that's used, that there was care and consideration put into that. If there was a way to show that, I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't know if that's universally true yet, but a combination of better understanding of animals and science, and pushing more to the ethics of using animals in research, we are getting there. We're getting there to the point where a day will come when every animal that's used, we've weighed this. This is important. This animal in this use, this matters. This is worth the sacrifice. Then comes the hardest thing in the world. How do you convince people that you are there? And if only we could find a way to make sure that we've done that, and then to show people that we've done that, I really think that it would be good for science. It would be, it would help get the public behind work that badly needs to be done. And it would be really good for animal welfare, because it would mean that nobody's taking it lightly. Everybody's really put the thought in, and then you have shown that you did that in my dreams. One thing that I'm constantly amazed at is how seriously IACUCs take their role, and how responsibly they do it, and how much institutional support and really the expectation that the IACUCs will do this. It's important for our institution. We expect you to do it responsibly, and everybody steps right up. And that's a huge change from when I started, and we didn't even have the IACUC regs. So
that was actually my next question, is how has that changed over the course of your career? I mean, you really see more attention to that now than...
Yeah. And I mean, everybody, originally, we started, and the amendments to the act that brought in the IACUC, that was in 1985, then the implementing regulations were in 1991. We had a learning curve, the early 90s, people were starting to figure this out. Early 2000s, I think everybody was sort of chugging along with, the required paperwork and and understanding what our role is and what the inspectors are looking for. And then we went to the next step. You know what? We the IACUC, we can really make a difference. We can make this better. And we're not just meeting the regs. We're making this research better. We're making these animals' lives better. And it really is there. I'll just put a little plug for the inspectors. I don't spend every day in the car anymore, going around from place to place and looking at different animals, but I am constantly inspired by them, because it's not always easy, and sometimes you're telling people things they don't want to hear, and you're always having to learn everything about a situation quickly, thinking on your feet, making important decisions quickly. And I'm constantly amazed at how calm, thoughtful, focused, they really can be.